Hey everybody, and welcome back to The Shining. I have my candle lit, I have incense burning, and I'm ready to talk about a scary movie. So, without further ado, let's dive into The Exorcist 3.
The creator of the original Exorcist is back with a terror unlike any ever known. Just behind this door. William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist 3.
Okay, so before I decide to get into the plot of this movie, real quick, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to follow my Instagram. But now that that's out of the way, let's start talking about The Exorcist 3. Alright, so let me give you a quick synopsis of what the film is about. I did take some notes because if I try to do this off the top of my head, these videos would be a lot longer because I'm a mess. So, there is fair warning on that. So, it revolves around Bill Kinderman, who is played by the great George Scott, and by the way, in this film, he does absolutely amazing. Anyway, he is a detective, and he's investigating these really strange murders that are, we'll call them copycat murders for now, of the Gemini Killer, which is the Exorcist equivalent of the Zodiac Killer. What he does is he decapitates their head, he puts the mark of the Gemini on one hand and cuts off the index finger of the other hand. Well, here's the kicker. The Gemini Killer has been dead for 15 years. Okay, so fast forward, that's kind of what you're opening with. They mention it a lot. So there's that aspect, the Gemini Killer. They're trying to figure out who it is, if it's a copycat, whatever. So, boom. You have Kinderman, who definitely plays a more, I don't know, like a mobster kind of detective, if that makes any sense. He's very, very coarse, super funny, but very coarse at times, and sometimes a little much. So anyway, his best friend is Father Dyer, because of course you have to have a plethora of fathers and Catholic references if you're gonna have an Exorcist movie, and his name is Father Dyer. And the reason that Father Dyer and Bill Kinderman are best friends is because 15 years ago, coincidentally, their other father friend, Father Karras, died. He fell down the infamous steps or whatever from the first Exorcist, yada yada yada, pushed, whatnot. Whew. So then, fast forward later into the movie, you find out that the Gemini Killer actually possessed the body of Father Karras before he died, and he is known as Patient X, and he is in a mental ward. Okay, so that's what you're working with in this movie. It's a lot of one-on-one conversation. There's not a lot of jump scares per se. It is not like the first Exorcist movie. At least I would not compare the two because they're very, very different. However, one aspect remained the same in The Exorcist 3, and that is a very, very slow build. This movie has a very slow build, but it's not bad. It is done well. Believe it or not, there is not a lot of score in this movie either. It is a lot of silence. It's very subtle. So it was different getting into that. Just feel of not having that heavy score that we're so used to in a lot of horror movies. This did not have that, especially knowing how infamous the bells are from the original Exorcist movie. So, the thing with this movie though is it reminds me a lot of Silence of the Lambs, even though this was released a year before Silence of the Lambs. And the reason I say that is because you have Brad Dourif, who plays, he is the Gemini killer who was also in the body of Father Karras. So remember that. Father Karras and the Gemini killer are one person, but it switches their faces through the scenes, depending on who was talking to Bill Kinderman, aka George Scott. Those one-on-one conversations are what make this movie great for me. Brad Dourif kills it in this movie. And a lot of people do not talk about this movie, obviously, because the first one is quite possibly the greatest horror film ever made, and the second one is a piece of garbage. So then you have the third one. No one really cares by the third one at that point, let's be honest. Fair assumption. So I wasn't really going into this movie with a lot of high hopes, to be perfectly honest with you. And it actually took me a couple times to get through it because I just was not open-minded enough to sit down and actually give it a chance. However, I was extremely surprised. Again, Brad Dourif does amazing in his scenes. You can really feel the emotion, you can see it, and it's extremely unsettling at times. His monologues are kind of crazy, especially when he starts revealing the nature of the Gemini killer's crimes and the murders and just how serious they are. For example, the Gemini killer is the reason, this is a spoiler if you haven't seen the movie, so I'm sorry, I'm warning you now. Father Dyer, the best friend of Mr. Kinderman, is one of the first deaths that you really not see, but is heavily talked about or a focal point of the film. And let me tell you, it's creepy. Of course, he was decapitated. His entire blood supply was drained and put into jars. Just far out stuff. So, you know, you get to hear a monologue of the crazy, sometimes too much details of these murders. Like, for example, Brad Dourif starts talking about how after the head is decapitated, it can still see for up to 20 seconds. And he makes the head look at the body, and it's just, it's gross. And I don't know about you, but decapitations make me squirm, especially when they're not cheesy. I'm not talking about a, you know, swipe of the machete and a head just starts tumbling away. Not like that, like, you know, with a pair of loppers, like, ksh, no thank you, I'm good. However, The Exorcist 3 has possibly the greatest jump scare ever, okay? So why don't we take a look at that? So even though it has quite possibly the greatest jump scare ever, which we just watched, it also has a really fun way of approaching the exorcism. Originally, this film was not going to have an exorcism, but the studio wanted one, so they put it in there. Originally, this movie wasn't even going to be called The Exorcist 3. It was going to be called Legion, but they wanted to attach it to the already super famous Exorcist movie, and that's why we have The Exorcist 3 and not Legion. However, I think the way they approached the exorcism in this one is extremely effective. I'm glad they did not try to mimic, the exorcism in the original. But another thing they did in this film that I noticed that I thought was extremely interesting was, instead of having these paranormal events happening all the time in a rapid pace, it's almost as if it's following behind Kinderman. So almost like the demon is letting Kinderman be ahead, if that makes any sense at all. So I think that the use of having just a vessel, I mean, that's essentially what was happening, is the Gemini killer is possessing the other senile patients in the mental ward, and they're doing the dirty work without recollection. So I think that that twist was super effective. You definitely can compare this movie to Seven. I even watched a video on it before I decided to do a video myself on how similar the films are. So I definitely would check that out. If you enjoyed the movie Seven, you will definitely enjoy The Exorcist 3. I highly recommend this movie. The acting is superb. However, the only thing that really bothered me was sometimes Bill Kinderman's character overacted a tad. You already had Brad Dourif, who was knocking it out of the park, and there were some scenes where it was just, I don't know, George Scott was just doing a tad too much. And I mean, he was already a very eccentric actor that we knew of anyway, so that's not necessarily surprising. However, in the final scenes during the exorcism, just him screaming and just yelling, I don't know, it was a tad distracting for me, and I could have gone without all the yelling. But other than that, the undertones of this movie are perfect. Just, I don't know, this movie was made smart. It is subtle, and for me personally, subtle scares and, you know, undertones that just freak you out, just creepy almost, that is effective to me more so than just jump scares every couple scenes. So The Exorcist 3 was definitely a treat. If you like slow burn type of horror movies, this is the one for you. So please let me know what you think of The Exorcist 3. And again, you keep watching scary movies. I'm going to keep talking about them. I really enjoyed this one, and I think you're going to as well. So go check it out, and if you have, let me know what you think. And keep it creepy.